All right. Welcome back to the live show. You know what time it is. It is your boy Genesis. Yes, sir. It is currently 6:23 p.m. And of course, today is the 22nd of June, 2025. Happy Sunday. Okay, God is the greatest. You know what I say every single time. God is the greatest. There's nobody, no human being like God. Okay, God is God. God is love. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for pulling in. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being here. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking. Thank you for being a part of the channel. All right, we know what happened. Okay, we know what happened yesterday. It was heavy. Everybody was skeptical. Some people were so happy it happened. Some people were like, I don't know. I don't know. Some people were not happy. Some people were happy. But one thing I got to say is the majority of Americans were relieved that that took place and that the pilots were out of danger. And right now, we just got news that the pilots are back in the United States, in Missouri, safe and sound. So for that, I want to say thank God for journeying mercies and for getting the job done. Like no other country can get it done. All right, with that being said, the Pentagon, Pete Hegseth, and General Raisin Kane, just like the 45th, now the 47th president always says, they're about to give, or they already gave their press briefing today. So we're going to check that out, and we're going to talk about what else is going on between Israel and Iran and what the consequences of what happened last night will be. Here we go.
Well, thank you for joining us this morning. Last night, on President Trump's orders, U.S. Central Command conducted a precision strike in the middle of the night against 3 nuclear facilities in Iran, Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan, in order to destroy or severely degrade Iran's nuclear program. And as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs will demonstrate, it was an incredible and overwhelming success. The order we received from our commander-in-chief was focused, it was powerful, and it was clear. We devastated the Iranian nuclear program. But it's worth noting the operation did not target Iranian troops or the Iranian people. For the entirety of his time in office, President Trump has consistently stated for over 10 years that Iran must not get a nuclear weapon. Full stop. Thanks to President Trump's bold and visionary leadership and his commitment to peace through strength, Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated. Many presidents have dreamed of delivering the final blow to Iran's nuclear program, and none could until President Trump. The operation President Trump planned was bold and it was brilliant, showing the world that American deterrence.
All right. For some reason, that audio wasn't too good. It was getting better, but we have better options. So here we go. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, thank you for joining us this morning. Last night, on President Trump's orders, U.S. Central Command conducted a precision strike in the middle of the night against 3 nuclear facilities in Iran, Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan, in order to destroy or severely degrade Iran's nuclear program. And as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs will demonstrate, it was an incredible and overwhelming success. The order we received from our commander-in-chief was focused, it was powerful, and it was clear. We devastated the Iranian nuclear program. But it's worth noting the operation did not target Iranian troops or the Iranian people. For the entirety of his time in office, President Trump has consistently stated for over 10 years that Iran must not get a nuclear weapon. Full stop. Thanks to President Trump's bold and visionary leadership and his commitment to peace through strength, Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated. Many presidents have dreamed of delivering the final blow to Iran's nuclear program, and none could until President Trump. The operation President Trump planned was bold and it was brilliant, showing the world that American deterrence is back. When this president speaks, the world should listen. And the U.S. military, we can back it up. The most powerful military the world has ever known. No other country on planet Earth could have conducted the operation that the chairman is going to outline this morning. Not even close. Just like Soleimani found out in the first term, Iran found out when POTUS says 60 days that he seeks peace and negotiation, he means 60 days of peace and negotiation. Otherwise, that nuclear program, that nuclear capability will not exist. He meant it. This is not the previous administration. The President Trump said no nukes. He seeks peace, and Iran should take that path. He sent out a truth last night saying this: any retaliation by Iran against the United States of America will be met with force far greater than what was witnessed tonight. Signed, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Iran would be smart to heed those words. He's said it before, and he means it. I want to give recognition to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Joint Staff, General Eric Kurilla at CENTCOM, who did a phenomenal job, he and his staff, all of CENTCOM. Policy across the board, this was a joint effort, and across the Pentagon effort. I want to recognize the pilots who flew those bombers, who flew those fighters, who flew those refuelers, warriors. I want to recognize the sailors on those destroyers, in those subs, on those carriers, warriors, all of them. I want to recognize our soldiers doing air defense, base defense, QRF, warriors, all of them. Every American involved in this operation performed flawlessly. And I want to give recognition to our allies in Israel as well. This is a plan that took months and weeks of positioning and preparation so that we could be ready when the President of the United States called. It took a great deal of precision. It involved misdirection and the highest of operational security. Our B-2s went in and out of downtown Tehran, of these nuclear sites, in and out and back without the world knowing at all. In that way, it was historic. A strike that included the longest B-2 Spirit bomber mission since 2001 and the first operational employment of the MOP, a massive ordnance penetrator. The mission demonstrated to the world the level of joint and allied integration that speak to the strength of our alliance and our joint forces. As President Trump has stated, the United States does not seek war, but let me be clear. We will act swiftly and decisively when our people, our partners, or our interests are threatened. Iran should listen to the President of the United States and know that he means it, every word. I want to give congratulations to our Commander-in-Chief. It was an honor to watch him lead last night and throughout, and to our great American warriors on this successful operation. God bless our troops. God bless America. And we give glory to God for his providence and continue to ask for his protection. I turn it over now to the chairman for specifics.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thanks for recognizing all of our folks out there doing our nation's work, and nice to see everybody on this early Sunday morning. Last night, on the President's orders, U.S. Central Command, under the command of General Eric Kurilla, executed Operation Midnight Hammer, a deliberate and precise strike against 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. This was a complex and high-risk mission carried out with exceptional skill and discipline by our joint force. I want to thank every service member, planner, operator that made this mission possible. Their actions reflect the highest standards of the United States Armed Forces. This operation was designed to severely degrade Iran's nuclear weapons infrastructure. It was planned and executed across multiple domains and theaters with coordination that reflects our ability to project power globally with speed and precision at the time and place of our nation's choosing. This was a highly classified mission with very few people in Washington knowing the timing or nature of this plan. I'll refer you to the graphic on the side as I walk you through some of the operational details. At midnight Friday into Saturday morning, a large B-2 strike package comprised of bombers launched from the continental United States. As part of the plan to maintain tactical surprise, part of the package proceeded to the west and into the Pacific as a decoy, a deception effort known only to an extremely small number of planners and key leaders here in Washington and in Tampa. The main strike package, comprised of 7 B-2 Spirit bombers, each with 2 crew members, proceeded quietly to the east with minimal communications. Throughout the 18-hour flight into the target area, the aircraft completed multiple in-flight refuelings. Once over land, the B-2s linked up with escort and support aircraft in a complex, tightly timed maneuver requiring exact synchronization across multiple platforms in a narrow piece of airspace, all done with minimal communications. This type of integration is exactly what our joint force does better than anyone else in the world. At approximately 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time last night, and just prior to the strike package entering Iran, a U.S. submarine in the Central Command area of responsibility launched more than 24 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles against key surface infrastructure targets at Esfahan. As the Operation Midnight Hammer strike package entered Iranian airspace, the U.S. employed several deception tactics, including decoys, as the 4th and 5th generation aircraft pushed out in front of the strike package at high altitude and high speed, sweeping in front of the package for enemy fighters and surface-to-air missile threats. The strike package was supported by U.S. Strategic Command, U.S. Transportation Command, U.S. Cyber Command, U.S. Space Command, U.S. Space Force, and U.S. European Command. As the strike package approached Fordo and Natanz, the U.S. protection package employed high-speed suppression weapons to ensure safe passage of the strike package, with fighter assets employing preemptive suppressing fires against any potential Iranian surface-to-air threats. We are currently unaware of any shots fired at the U.S. strike package on the way in. At approximately 6:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2:10 a.m. Iran time, the lead B-2 dropped 2 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator weapons on the first of several aim points at Fordo. As the president stated last night, the remaining bombers then hit their targets as well, with a total of 14 MOPs dropped against 2 nuclear target areas. All 3 Iranian nuclear infrastructure targets were struck between 6:40 p.m. and 7:05 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, that's about 2:10 in the morning local time in Iran, with the Tomahawk missiles being the last to strike at Esfahan to ensure we retain the element of surprise throughout the operation. Following weapons release, the Midnight Hammer strike package exited Iranian airspace and the package began its return home. We are unaware of any shots fired at the package on the way out. Iran's fighters did not fly, and it appears that Iran's surface-to-air missile systems did not see us. Throughout the mission, we retained the element of surprise. In total, U.S. forces employed approximately 75 precision-guided weapons during this operation. This included, as the President stated last night, 14 30,000-pound GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, marking the first ever operational use of this weapon. I know that battle damage is of great interest. Final battle damage will take some time, but initial battle damage assessments indicate that all three sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction. More than 125 U.S. aircraft participated in this mission, including B-2 stealth bombers, multiple flights of fourth and fifth generation fighters, dozens and dozens of air refueling tankers, a guided missile submarine, and a full array of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft, as well as hundreds of maintenance and operational professionals. As the Secretary said, this was the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history and the second longest B-2 mission ever flown, exceeded only by those in the days following 9/11. Well prior to the strike, General Kurilla elevated force protection measures across the region, especially in Iraq, Syria, and the Gulf. Our forces remain on high alert and are fully postured to respond to any Iranian retaliation or proxy attacks, which would be an incredibly poor choice. We will defend ourselves. The safety of our service members and civilians remains our highest priority. This mission demonstrates the unmatched reach, coordination, and capability of the United States military. In just a matter of weeks, this went from strategic planning to global execution. This operation underscores the unmatched capabilities and global reach of the United States military. As the President clearly said last night, no other military in the world could have done this. I join the President and the Secretary in being incredibly proud of the air crews, naval forces, cyber operators, planners, and support teams, and commanders who made this mission possible. It is their skill, discipline, and teamwork that makes this operation possible. I am particularly proud of our discipline related to operational security, something that was of great concern to the President, the Secretary, General Kurilla, and me, and we will continue to focus on this. As we stand here this morning, many assets are still airborne, and we have hundreds deployed. I ask that we keep our warfighters on their way home and our deployed service member in our thoughts. Our joint force remains ready to defend the United States, our troops, and our interests in the region. Thank you very much.
We will take a few questions, Phil.
Me?
Yeah.
So, is regime change off the table, Mr. Secretary? And to the chairman, you said the battle damage assessment is still ongoing, but do you believe that some nuclear capability in Iran remains?
This mission was not and has not been about regime change. The President authorized a precision operation to neutralize the threats to our national interests posed by the Iranian nuclear program and the collective self-defense of our troops and our ally Israel.
Thanks for your question. I think BDA is still pending, and it would be way too early for me to comment on what may or may not still be there. But thanks for the question.
Green. No, behind you.
Excuse me, Mr. Secretary, can you tell me, was there a particular moment when the President decided to pull the trigger on this operation where he said, now, rather than being, something in the holster, now we're going to pull the trigger on it?
I would just say, having the opportunity to witness his leadership, he was fully committed to the peace process, wanted a negotiated outcome, gave Iran every single opportunity, and unfortunately was met by stonewalling, which is why he gave them plenty of time to continue to come to the table and give up enrichment, give up the nuclear program. But there was a I won't say the particular moment. There was certainly a moment in time where he realized that it had to be a certain action taken in order to minimize the threat to us and our troops. Yeah.
General, you say that General Kurilla increased force protection in Iraq, Syria, and Gulf, in those areas. Were they given any advance warning the attacks were coming? And also, Mr. Secretary, when were congressional leaders notified? How long before the attacks took place?
Sir, to your first question, you know, the risk has clearly been rising over the last few weeks in the region. Based on that, and not a particular awareness of this operation, we've made smart decisions to minimize the risk to U.S. forces in the region.
So they were given no advance warning?
No, sir.
And congressional?
They were notified after the planes were safely out. Well, we complied with the notification requirements of the War Powers
After
Act.
the attacks, they were notified?
They were immediately thereafter. Yes.
Thank you, Secretary. Two quick questions. Do you believe you completely destroyed Iranian nuclear program? And how about Iranian ballistic missiles? Your ally as Israel always saying that is biggest threat. And second question is very important. What will be your next step if Iran or militias under Iranian influence on the region attack U.S. interests or allies in the region?
And you can chime in on this too, Mr. Chairman. The battle damage assessment is ongoing, but our initial assessment, as the chairman said, is that all of our precision munitions struck where we wanted them to strike and had the desired effect. Which means especially in Fordo, which was the primary target here, we believe we achieved destruction of capabilities there. Ultimately, wherever it may be, whether it's in Iraq or Syria or bases in the Gulf, as the president said, it would be, as the chairman said, it would be a very bad idea for Iran or its proxies to attempt to attack American forces. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Regarding retaliations, Iran and North Korea are cooperating on nuclear and missile development. Do you think there is a possibility that Iran, North Korea, and the other forces, such as China, will join forces to retaliate against the United States?
Well, unfortunately, because of the policies under the previous administration, we drove those countries together, and ultimately that creates a challenging environment. For this particular operation, the focus is on Iran and Iranian nuclear capabilities. That's our focus here, is to not just say that they can't have, but President Trump has said from over 20 years, frankly, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And ultimately, he decided this is the moment, given their stonewalling, when direct military action had to be taken to prevent that from happening. Yes.
Thank you very much. General Kane, I understand OPSEC, I respect OPSEC. Can you say at all what security procedures are being taken to protect U.S. troops in Iraq and elsewhere in the Middle East? And Secretary Hegseth, as a global war on terrorism veteran, what do you say to veterans who may be concerned the U.S. is getting into another open-ended war in the Middle East over weapons of mass destruction?
Thanks, sir, for the question. I won't comment on what force protection measures are being taken in the region. What I will say is we're being proactive and not reactive, and being very thoughtful about ensuring that we do all that we can to protect our forces out there.
And I would just say, as the president has directed and made clear, this is most certainly not open-ended. It doesn't mean it limits our ability to respond. We will respond if necessary. The most powerful military in the world is postured and prepared to defend our people. But what the president gave us, as I said, was a focused, powerful, and clear mission on the destruction of Iranian nuclear capabilities. Those were the targets. That's what was struck. That's what was overwhelming. That's what was overwhelming. That's what the Iranian regime needs to understand, as the president put out last night. He wants peace. There needs to be a negotiated settlement here. We ultimately demonstrated that Iran cannot have a nuclear capability. That is a very clear mission set on this operation. Yes, hold on. Yes, right there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Question for the Secretary and the Chairman. How was this strike coordinated with the Israelis on a strategic level, militarily, and on a tactical level? Was there any direct Israeli military participation in this operation?
Well, I would say certainly Israel had an incredible military success, especially at the beginning and ongoing, in degrading Iranian capabilities, in degrading Iranian launchers, MRBMs. It's been incredible to watch what our ally Israel has been able to do. And there certainly have been conversations. I mean, General Kurilla at CENTCOM has worked closely in the defense of Israel for many years. And part of this operation was the defense of Israel and the ongoing defense of Israel. But as it pertains to this strike, this was U.S. operated and U.S. led.
We took advantage of some of the preparatory work that's been done over the past week and a half in terms of axis of approach. I won't get into the particulars, but as the Secretary said, it was a U.S. strike. We made sure we were not in the same piece of airspace and sky. Aside from that, that was the extent of it.
We'll take a couple more. Yeah, right there.
Question to the Secretary first. Are you concerned whatsoever now about the reaction from U.S. allies given the strike, particularly those in the Gulf? And to the Chairman, if I may, I understand you don't want to speak to specific assets and force protection measures, but do you anticipate at least having to bring in any further assets from other theaters to aid in force protection over the coming days?
We certainly understand the challenges of allies in the region, and we have been respectful and in working in collaboration with them as it pertains to basing and sensitivities there. Ultimately, they've got a lot of assets and people in those locations also where American troops are co-located. So that's a consideration of ours. We've been in close consultation with them, and we appreciate the support that we have got.
Thanks for the question on sort of the global picture. And as you know, that's one of my jobs, is to look globally at the entire range of challenges. We are always carefully considering our force posture around the world and then offering options to the Secretary and to the President. I won't comment on any future things, but the American people should know that we carefully consider those moves around the world and try to modulate as needed our force structure in the region.
Absolutely. Yeah, right here.
Thank you. What communications are being sent to the Iranians right now, and is there any possibility of diplomacy now or in the coming days?
I can only confirm that there are both public and private messages being directly delivered to the Iranians in multiple channels, giving them every opportunity to come to the table. They understand precisely what the American position is, precisely what steps they can take to allow for peace, and we hope they do so. Yes.
The president may not want an open-ended conflict. The Iranians may disagree. Are you prepared for a protracted war?
Well, anything can happen in conflict. We acknowledge that. But the scope of this was intentionally limited. That's the message that we're sending. With the capabilities of the American military, nearly unlimited. So Iran, in that sense, has a choice. But we've made it very clear to them, this is nuclear sites, this is nuclear capabilities, this is the line that the president set, and we set that back. Now is the time to come forward for peace. But I think one of the takeaways from this as well is the unprecedented level of ongoing cooperation. I can't speak highly enough of the chairman and his staff and General Kurilla in CENTCOM, what they've done to look around the corner, to pre-position, to understand how an operation like this comes together. The scope and scale of what occurred last night would take the breath away of almost any American if you had an opportunity to watch it in real time. And I think Tehran is certainly calculating the reality that planes flew from the middle of America in Missouri overnight, completely undetected, over 3 of their most highly sensitive sites, and we were able to destroy nuclear capabilities. And our boys in those bombers are on their way home right now. We believe that'll have a clear psychological impact on how they view the future, and we certainly hope they take the path of negotiated peace. But I could not be more proud of how this building operated, of the precision, the sensitivity, and the professionalism of the troops involved in this effort. I will take one more. We'll take one more question. Yes, right there.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, concerning the justification for these strikes, in March, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released their threat assessment, concluding, quote, Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear programs he suspended in 2003, unquote. So what new intelligence does the U.S. have since then that the Iranians have changed their position on nuclear weapons? And does this new intelligence come from U.S. sources and methods, or are we getting this information from other countries?
Well, I would just simply say that the president's made it very clear. He's looked at all of this, all of the intelligence, all of the information, and come to the conclusion that the Iranian nuclear program is a threat, and was willing to take this precision operation to neutralize that threat in order to advance American national interests, reduce the Iranian nuclear program, and obviously collective self-defense of ourselves and our allies. So he looked at all of it, understood the nature of the threat, and took bold action I think the American people would expect in a commander-in-chief. That's all we've got. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
America is the greatest country in the world. This is the greatest nation on earth. This is the greatest country in the world, ladies and gentlemen.
Let's get back to this country and Washington. The chief national security correspondent, Jennifer Griffin, is live for us at the Pentagon. Jennifer.
Well, Trace, I think what's so extraordinary about tonight's strikes, not only all eyes were on Fordo, and for the past week we've been talking about the B-2 bombers and the massive ordnance penetrators. Those are the 30,000-pound GBU-57 bunker buster bombs. What we can report tonight, after Sean Hannity spoke to the president, we learned that there were 6 massive ordnance penetrators dropped on Fordo. And as the president wrote on Truth Social, that Fordo site is gone. My sources tell me that those bunker buster bombs would have been dropped through the air ventilation shafts at Fordo. So most likely 3 bunker busters through each of those shafts. We had been focusing on the entrances. There are 2 entrances to the Fordo site, which is 300 feet underground. We've also reported that the MOP bomb can penetrate about 200 feet underground, but they work in pairs. The B-2 bomber, which flew out of Whiteman Air Force Base, they fly nonstop and are refueled along the way to this site at Fordo. They drop one MOP bomb, a 30,000-pound bomb that goes about 200 feet down. There's soil that is then removed, exposed, and then the second bomb, which drops into a hole that has a radius of about 25 feet. It goes into the same hole and can go even deeper. So Fordo, we understand, is gone. That is significant because that was the main nuclear enrichment site, and it was deeply fortified in that mountain. But then there are the 2 other sites. You have Natanz, which had 3 underground enrichment facilities. Those 3, we understand that 30 Tomahawk missiles were fired from U.S. submarines about 400 miles away from these sites, the sites at Isfahan and Natanz. Those U.S. submarines were most likely Ohio-class converted guided missile subs. Most likely the USS Georgia or Florida were involved in those strikes. What I'm being told, though, is at Isfahan is an even harder target than Fordo. We hadn't talked about it as much this week because all the focus was on the B-2s and the MOP bombs and Fordo. But Isfahan is where the uranium hexafluoride is, where the centrifuges are made. And my understanding is there is a tunnel into the mountain there, and it is much, much deeper than at Fordo. And so we will have to wait and see the bomb damage assessment at that site to see how whether it was completely destroyed. I'm told from very, very knowledgeable sources that that was most likely the hardest site. So we'll have to see.
I know we're still getting new information coming in here, Jennifer, but just for kind of clarification here, we have been told, or we've been kind of reporting that the B-2s went in and they went into Fordo and may have dropped as many as 6 of the bunker busters, and there were as many as 30 Tomahawks fired at Natanz and Isfahan. And I'm wondering, do we know, have we ruled out the possibility of any bunker busters being used on Isfahan and on Natanz?
I'm told that the bunker busters were used at Fordo and that it was the Tomahawks that targeted Natanz and Isfahan. So at this point in time, you would have had at least 3 B-2 bombers there above Fordo. Again, when we woke up this morning, all eyes were on the reports and the sightings, the radar trackers, the flight trackers who saw that there were those 6 B-2 bombers flying towards Guam. And now if you were to fly from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri all the way to Iran, let's say, that's a 30-hour straight flight. So those bombers could not possibly have been involved in this strike. That's when we look at what would have been flying east. Clearly, some B-2 bombers from Whiteman flew east, and that's why we saw this week about 30 air refuelers that were positioned in Europe and along the way and throughout the Middle East, because they would have been required to create an air refueling bridge to get those B-2s. It's a 15-hour flight if you go east from Whiteman to Fordo. And so those bombers would have flown east, and they would have been refueled along the way, and they would be on their way back home to Whiteman as we speak, Trace.
Jennifer Griffin, we'll get back to you. Jennifer, thank you.
Hey, it's Will Kane. Click here.
The greatest nation on earth is America. I'll say it again
Let's
and
go
again.
back to
All
Trey
right, here we
Inks.
go.
They now have sirens in Tel Aviv. Trey, what are you hearing?
This morning, this happened.
Yeah, Trace, right now, air raid sirens are sounding across Tel Aviv amid incoming ballistic missile fire. We've not yet seen any of Israel's air defense systems active, but we're going to wait and see what happens here. There are sirens, according to the initial alerts, sounding across the entirety of central Israel, all the way from Haifa in the north to the Negev Desert in the south. We also understand at this moment, this alert has gone out to everyone in this part of the country, sending millions of people into bomb shelters. Many people trying to get underground. There are a few cars out on the road right now, but you remember we talked about those emergency orders that went into effect from Israel's Home Front Command just before this missile attack took place. Again, we don't yet see any air defense systems that are active over the city at this moment. But we're certainly waiting to see how this develops. This is the initial Iranian response to the American strikes that took place overnight, targeting the country's nuclear facilities. There are also initial reports of air raid sirens sounding in Jordan as these missiles fly over that country toward Israel. And so, again, this is a very common occurrence over the past 9 days here, Trace, as these sirens will sound. They're interceptors. Yep. All right. And so we're going to get inside here. Stay with us, Trace. Get in.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go. Move with me. We're with you. We're still with you, Trace. So we saw at least one interceptor over the city, Trace, an indication that the air defense systems are active over Tel Aviv. And this is, like Aaron said, the initial response. And in the distance, we can hear 2 booms. And likely these are the interceptions that are taking place over the city. Trace.
The sirens, Trey, the fact that they have stopped, is it because they are intermittent, it's not consistent, or is it something else?
Generally, these sirens will go on for a period of time, and then they'll stop. The threat is not over, though, when the sirens end. That's very important to note. In the past, we have seen these sirens stop, and a few moments later, a loud explosion or a missile slipping past the air defense systems. These are the same sirens that sound when there's incoming rocket fire from Gaza or missile fire from Lebanon. What's different with these ballistic missiles, they have such a large payload that when they are actually striking the ground, the destruction goes for blocks. We've been to many of these locations, and we've seen the aftermath of these ballistic missile strikes from the Iranian regime. And so far, 24 people have been killed in Israel, civilians who have been targeted in these Iranian strikes. And so, again, this is likely just the initial wave of an Iranian response. They're trying to put up some sort of response to these strikes overnight. But certainly, given the fact that so many of these launchers have been destroyed, these ballistic missile launchers by IDF strikes, it is unlikely that they're able to fire in waves like they did at the very beginning of this conflict between Israel and Iran. Trace.
Trey, stay safe, take cover. We'll bring you back on as soon as they give the all clear. Thank you.
hopefully everybody in Israel and the Iranian people as well, hopefully they're safe. I just hope Iran would come back to the table, like the supreme leader. When I say Iran, I actually mean the supreme leader, and those people on top will come to the realization and come back to the table and say, you know what? All right, let's advocate for peace. We want peace now. But I don't know if this is going to be easy, but if the alarms are still sounding in Tel Aviv, I guess Iran is ready for more.
All right, joining us now with more is Israeli Special Ops veteran Aaron Cohn is with us. Aaron, we have gamed this out now since the start of this conflict. We knew probably after October 7th that big things in the region were likely to happen down the road. The Iranians were given every opportunity to stop fomenting terror. They're the #1 state sponsor of terror. And I want to lead into my question by reminding people I've been to Israel many times. And I've been in those underground terror tunnels, and I've been to the border towns like Sderot. By the time I had been there, it was a town that had been hit with 10,000 rockets in the 10 previous years. It was a town with the naked eye, you could see Gaza, and children had to play in underground bunker playgrounds because it only took 12, 13 seconds for a rocket to be fired and land in that town. I saw the progression of the rockets that were being fired into Israel, how much more lethal they were on year 10 than year 1 to inflict maximum harm and carnage and damage to human life. So, you know, I ask Americans tonight, maybe there are a couple that are skeptical, although the Insider Advantage Trafalgar poll said any means necessary should take out these nuclear sites. But anybody that might have doubt, how many rockets would need to be fired into an American town or city before Americans would demand that their government respond? If you add up all the rockets over all the decades that have been fired into Israel, how many hundreds of thousands have been fired? If you talk about Lebanon, if you talk about Gaza, now the Houthi rebels, the Iranians directly, how many more missiles will Israel be able to withstand? At this point, it seems like a line has to be drawn in the sand. If you fire a missile at Israel, it is over. You will be obliterated again. And once that message goes out, probably it stops. That's my hope.
Sean, you nailed it. Tonight's strike, look, not only historic, as you said, but this was an intelligence-driven decapitation of the #1 state sponsor of terror and Iran's nuclear program. And you can't have the #1 state sponsor of terror have nuclear capability, period. So Fordow, Natanz, Esfahan, all critical to weaponizing uranium, hit in one coordinated operation. And it worked because the United States and Israel, who I believe have been planning this for quite some time, knew exactly when to strike. Months of joint U.S. and Israeli intelligence, cyber, deep and dangerous human intelligence. Sean, that's the Israeli intel organization Mossad and Unit 8200, deep inside of Iran, satellite, tons of signal intercepts, all converging to map every inch of these facilities, according to my friends who are now running the show in Israel from back in my day. So the 2-week delay that Brett mentioned, and the operational silence here, deception, beautifully played, gave Iran just enough confidence to relax. And then they got hit. So Sean, Fordow, in my opinion, was their insurance policy, the IRGC's insurance policy, and now it's rubble. And without a nuclear deterrent, the regime's soft white underbelly is exposed. And if they retaliate, which I agree with Brett, they will. But if they retaliate recklessly, missiles at U.S. targets, proxies, cyber, they're not just risking escalation. It's an important point that Brett mentioned. They're risking regime total collapse. But Trump didn't wait. He understood the threat. He took the shot. It wasn't impulsive. It was preemptive. And he waited the last possible moment. And I believe that strike, Sean, has shattered the myth of that regime invincibility. These guys like to beat their chest. But the Iranian people saw it. The Americans saw it. Europe just saw it. The entire world just saw it. And now it's time for the regime to come to the table or risk losing complete regime change from within. Because, Sean, if Fordow can fall, I promise you so can the entire Islamic Republic.
Well, I think that's very powerful. You know, both the president and Prime Minister Netanyahu both congratulated each other and both recognized how they worked together to accomplish what is historic. Taking out these facilities. It has been discussed. This has been the #1 state sponsor of terror. It has gone on for decades. The President Trump saying, thanking, congratulating the prime minister. We can go over all of their military successes, taking out all of the top leadership of Hamas, taking out Nasrallah, who'd been a leader for 32 years, taking out other taking out the scientists, the nuclear scientists in Iran, taking out their top generals in Iran, even yesterday. I mean, it is the pager incident, and I can go on and on, what they've been able to do to knock out, for example, no easy task, but just to knock out their ability or gaining the ability to control the airways by knocking out their air defense system. Not a simple thing to do. Knocking out their missile defense systems, knocking out their batteries, knocking out their military sites, you know, pounding their nuclear sites to prepare for this final attack by the U.S. tonight.
Sean, 100%. This was an intelligence-driven masterpiece. I don't know how else to explain it. And what the world saw tonight with these strikes on Fordow and Natanz and Isfahan, I believe is the final move, as I said before, in months long. I mean, this is chess played by America, by Trump, and Israel's top intelligence people. So I think the key here with this one, I agree with everything you just said. This goes back quite some time here, but I think the key for this one was knowing exactly when to hit, where to hit, and how to ensure that everything inside was still there when they hit. Remember, that pause may have created some motion within the IRGC to try and start moving things. So a lot of very coordinated, intelligence-driven operations. But, you know, this time, unlike Iraq, and I'm thinking of Reagan in my head, Iran's nuclear facility was the crown jewel of Iran's strength, and that's the importing of their terrorism brands. And so taking out the operational engines of that nuclear bomb has rung out to the entire world. It's going to create a paradigm shift here. And we know how deep Fordow was buried underneath. You had the Natanz, which ran the centrifuge cascades is what they're called. Isfahan is where that uranium was getting converted to that warhead grade material, and all of them now are smashed. So the tactical execution was not only flawless, but the ability to keep the signal completely silent to the media, to everybody, was a masterclass in intelligence. And not a single U.S. aircraft was lost. That message is, we can reach you anywhere. You're never going to see it coming. Don't mess with the United States. And Fordow wasn't just a facility, Sean. It was a symbol. And now it's gone. And I salute the president. I salute Israel. Nobody does this better. When you put the Americans and the Israelis together, Sean, you've got a very lethal playground with some incredible signaling into what Brett said. That's what the world needs to see. The Iranians may come back and try and sting a little bit, but my warning to them is be careful. You know, flex your little bicep, but remember, you can be taken down as a regime, and there's very good people and people outside of Iran ready to come back to Iran and rebuild that country, and they'll do it in a heartbeat, so be warned.
Fordow, gone. Natanz, gone. Isfahan, gone. Unbelievable. What an amazing military feat by the U.S. military tonight, and great work preparing the way by the Israeli military. And as the president said, you know, they work together as a team like no other team has ever worked before. and they worked in a long way to erase the horrible threat to Israel. I do believe, and I'll end on this, Aaron, is that I talk a lot about the Trump doctrine. I think there needs to be a new Israel doctrine, and that is you fire one rocket into Israel, you will be obliterated. It has to happen. People cannot live this way, for decades and decades. At that point, I'd like to see the Abraham Accords, maybe as a consequence of tonight, maybe something good that will come out of tonight will be that countries in the region will recognize Israel and their right to exist and create partnerships and business arrangements and a coalition of peace, and to eliminate extremism in the entire region. Aaron Cohn, thank you, sir.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey,
Moments ago, President Trump posting this. It's not moments ago.
Thank you for tuning into the live show. We are still checking out what happened last night.
Again, 30,000-pound bombs. Here with more details from tonight's very critical strike, along with what we can expect moving forward. Jennifer Griffin, she is in the Pentagon tonight. Jennifer, what's amazing about this, and I did have an opportunity just minutes before coming on the air to speak to the president. We had initially discussed, both of us this week, that it would probably take at the Fordo facility as many as 2 bunker buster bombs. I can confirm it was 6 bunker buster bombs that were used in on that one fortified, deeply buried inside that mountain site, the one that everybody worried about, the one that Israel was not going to be capable of taking out unless they went nuclear.
Well, that's right, Sean, and it's very interesting that the president shared with you that 6 of those MOP, massive ordnance penetrator, the 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs, were used on Fordo. That would mean that you would have had at least 3 B-2 bombers dropping those, because each of the B-2s can carry 2 of those MOP bombs. Based on my assessment and what I know about Fordo, there are 2 entrances to Fordo, so you may have had 2 bunker busters in each of the entrances. The way they work, as we've discussed in the past, Sean, is that one of the MOP bombs drops in and can penetrate about 200 feet underground. It makes about a 25-foot radius hole into the ground. And then the second bomb, dropped from the B-2 bomber, will penetrate that exact spot and go even further. And Fordo, as we know, is about 300 feet underground. I suspect that the third spot that was hit at Fordo, based on the structure of that facility, that underground nuclear facility in the mountain there, is a ventilation shaft that is very prominent. And if you dropped 2 bunker buster bombs of those MOP 30,000-pound bombs through the ventilation shaft, that would be another way to reach deep underground and to ensure that you destroyed that facility 300 feet underground. I think it's also notable, Sean, that the president told you that TLAMs, or Tomahawk missiles, were used in the strike on Natanz. Natanz also has an underground facility. Those Tomahawks would have been fired, as you mentioned, from submarines that were attached to either the USS Carl Vinson aircraft carrier strike group or the USS Nimitz, which was newly in the region. It had steamed all the way from the Pacific, and we understand that it arrived in the CENTCOM AOR earlier today. So those Tomahawks could be fired from any number of locations from those aircraft carriers. And then you have Isfahan. Isfahan is an above-ground site, and so you could have used conventional weapons for that. There could have been the Air Force could have been involved in that, or it could have been simply those Tomahawks. Natanz has 3 underground facilities, so there would have been about 6 points of impact at Natanz. And so we'll just have to wait and see if the B-2s were involved at all in Natanz or Isfahan, but certainly the involvement of Tomahawks, U.S. naval submarines, and those incredible B-2 bombers. What's notable to me, Sean, is that this morning we woke up looking westwards and this was all part of the deception in terms of the operational security for this incredible mission, is that those 6 B-2 bombers that were seen by radar trackers, open source flight trackers, they were heading west towards Guam, we were told. U.S. officials confirmed to us that they were heading to Guam. It's about a 30 30-hour flight. If they took off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri and flew directly to Iran, it would be about 30 hours. They would not have made it in time. So it was not those B-2s that were involved in this mission. Most likely what happened is the B-2s also took off to the east. So another squadron took off from Whiteman to the east, and that's about a 15-hour trip to Iran, and they would be on their way back to the United States right now. It's a 30-hour round trip if you fly to the east. And that's where we saw that air refueling bridge that was built earlier in the week, where all those air refuelers, about 30, were sent from the United States to Europe and to the Middle East to help
Jennifer,
with those B-2s. Sean?
Let me give you a little bit more detail. I'm being told now from a reliable source that Fordo, they believe it is gone. They believe that it has been wiped out. And again, we had discussed earlier in the week the possibility of not one but two bunker buster bombs. Again, 30,000-pound bombs being necessary to take out that one deeply buried facility. I can put clarification on Natanz and Esfahan, the other two facilities that you were referencing and discussing. The 30 Tomahawks from a submarine over 400 miles away took out the remainder of the sites. It was believed, the assessment was that the Israelis had taken out about 75% of those sites. So it was basically completing the mission that had begun with Israel on those other two locations, just to give you clarification.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. But truly, the fact that 30 Tomahawks were fired from the U.S. naval vessels, from those submarines, again, this just shows the strength and the ability and the precision of the U.S. military. And there's no doubt tonight, in my mind, Sean, that President Xi in Beijing and President Putin in Moscow are taking note of the U.S. military capabilities and what Israel has been able, tiny Israel has been able to accomplish in the last 10 days. So this is really a very, very significant night in terms of what the mission accomplished. But as we have discussed, what comes next? And the U.S. military is warning its personnel across the Middle East. There are 40,000 troops across the Middle East at bases in Syria, Iraq, as well as in the Gulf states. And they are now on high alert, expecting some sort of response from Iran. Now, if Iran were smart, and it's not clear that they are, they would not respond. And they would then try to negotiate in order to save their regime. But if they do something like mine the Strait of Hormuz or try to take a shot at any of those U.S. Navy vessels or manage to fire any missiles at U.S. bases or kill any American personnel, then this will escalate a lot further. This has the potential to end right now if the Iranians do not respond. Sean?
A couple of things that you're saying, Jennifer, and you get to follow the greatest, best military that God ever gave man, and the bravest of the brave. And you're right, and every single military effort brings with it danger, and you have to game out and calculate out what the potential response might be. Obviously, they are prepared for that. In the lead up to this, we know a lot of people had been evacuated. A lot of people had been warned. The president himself was warning the people in Tehran to get out of Tehran and give them an opportunity. As he said, he doesn't have a problem with the people of Iran, but they were never going to have nuclear weapons. We went back and looked. The first time he said that was in 2011. And he had been very, very consistent in his statement about that. And, you know, other early indications, too, is that he gave them, there was a little note at the end of his statement tonight that he's willing to discuss peace again. And then that creates now a dilemma, once again, for the supreme leader of Iran. Will he remain stubborn to the point where their refineries will be targeted next, where their gas grid will be targeted next, and they'll have no power? If they take out the refineries, they'll have no economy in Iran. So big decisions on their part tonight, things they should be thinking about if they're thinking about any retaliation. Jennifer Griffin, we'll get back to you. We appreciate your report, and God bless our military. Incredible feat that they were able to accomplish tonight.
God bless America, ladies and gentlemen. God bless America.
Now, we'll look here to break down reactions from the White House and globally. Let's bring in Fox News correspondent Chanley Painter. Chanley?
A historic moment. President Trump took to the podium just hours ago to address the nation, touting the U.S. bombing of 3 Iranian nuclear sites as a, quote, very successful strike and a turning point in the conflict, saying Iran must now make peace.
There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago.
We are also seeing mixed reactions from leaders across the globe and here at home who are now speaking out as they weigh the impact of these strikes. First, at the United Nations, the Secretary General of the UN quickly condemned the attack and urged diplomacy, saying this, quote, "This is a dangerous escalation in a region already on the edge and a direct threat to international peace and security." Likewise, officials from several Latin American countries like Venezuela, Cuba, and Mexico have also condemned the operation. While here at home, key Republican leaders in Washington, like House Speaker Mike Johnson, Senators Tim Scott, Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, all backing Trump's military action. Senator Graham posting this in part, quote, "This was the right call. The regime deserves it. We have the best Air Force in the world." Senator Cruz reacted with this in part, quote, "The prospect of the Iranian regime acquiring nuclear weapons represents the most acute immediate threat to America and our allies. When the Ayatollah chants death to America, he means it." Now, on the other side of the aisle, as you can imagine, some Democrats are saying the U.S. strikes in Iran are unconstitutional, including House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, posting in part, quote, "President Trump misled the country about his intentions, failed to seek congressional authorization for the use of military force." And Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez reacted with this: "The president's disastrous decision to bomb Iran without authorization is a grave violation of the Constitution and congressional war powers. He has impulsively risked launching a war that may ensnare us for generations." She says it is absolutely and clearly grounds for impeachment. It's also being reported that some countries like South Korea are actually convening emergency meetings to assess the broader implications and how Iran is starting to retaliate. Benjamin?
Yeah, Chanley, thank you very much. Keep us updated to how other countries respond. Thank you.
I'm Steve. This is what you have to understand, that as an American, you have to support your country. I get it. You may not, I guess, be 100% supportive of what the president did last night, which, okay, that's your opinion. But I fully support what the president did last night because everybody agrees that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Okay, and the B-2 bombers were only deployed to nuclear sites. Okay, keep that in mind. Only to nuclear site, ladies and gentlemen. So, to me, that is a win. All right, here we go.
I want to bring in Mark Dubowitz if I can here, because it's interesting. Yesterday, Mark, you had the Ayatollah Khamenei saying that there would be no surrender, period. Was not going to do it. And I'm wondering if that feeling has changed. I'm wondering what the next step is, what tomorrow brings diplomatically in your mind. Do you think it takes a few days before there's any type of response, Mark, or do you think this is something that is already kind of fomenting in Iran as we speak?
Leader who, with the Iranian president at the time, Rafsanjani, went to Ayatollah Khomeini in the Iran-Iraq war. They had fought a brutal war with Iraq, 8 years, 1 million Iranians and Iraqis had been killed. The United States accidentally shot down an Iranian civilian passenger airline and promised compensation, apologized. But Khamenei and Rafsanjani went to Khomeini and said, the United States is about to intervene militarily on behalf of the Iraqis. We have to sue for peace. And they told Khomeini, who famously said, I drank the poison chalice, and he agreed to a ceasefire. Well, that was Khamenei 40 years ago. Khamenei today is in a bunker. And the United States has just intervened militarily, not accidentally, but intentionally. And he's got to be asking himself, do I drink the poison chalice? Do I go back to Amman with my diplomats and agree to the peaceful deal that President Trump has repeatedly offered me? Or am I going to fight my last stand? And I think President Trump made it very clear tonight. Actually, I have to say it surprised me that this isn't just about the nuclear sites, that if you escalate and you don't go back to a peaceful agreement, we are going to use the U.S. military to go after other military and security targets. So Khamenei is facing a choice between his survival and his nuclear program. He saw the nuclear program get almost obliterated tonight. He's got to be asking himself about his survival.
Hey, Sean.
Again, so the people in the chat saying new wars, new war. This isn't a new war. This is not a new war, okay? The United States is not involved or escalating this into a new war. This is not, I repeat, this is not a new war. This is denuclearizing Iran. How simple can that get? I don't understand why people are saying this is a new. No, this is just denuclearizing Iran. Easy.
Yes, Brett,
go ahead.
Good afternoon, good evening. It's notable that we've heard from the Republican leadership here, but not from the Democratic leadership. Silence so far from Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leaders here. I think the most striking things that we've heard from Capitol Hill is that in the past couple of moments, Sean Casten, who is a Democrat from Northern Illinois, he has said that this is an unambiguous, impeachable offense. He's saying, I don't think we have the votes to impeach. He said, but you don't do this without congressional approval. And this is what Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie were indicating here, that they need to have congressional authorization in order to do this. They had a resolution that was due this week in the House of Representatives saying you can't move without Congressional War Powers Authority, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Ro Khanna said that, everybody needs to get back to D.C. and vote on this soon. Tim Kaine, the Democrat from Virginia, he had a statement and a resolution that's teed up for a possible vote this coming week in the Senate about war powers. And also, we just got a statement from Jim Himes. He's the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. He's a Democrat from Connecticut. And he says, quote, Donald Trump's decision to launch direct military action against Iran without congressional approval is a clear violation of the Constitution, which grants the power to declare war explicitly to Congress. This is part of this debate that we're going to have in the next couple of days here about whether or not the president could do this under Article 2, Section 2, which gives him the authority as commander-in-chief to kind of launch strikes preemptively, or whether or not they have to come to Capitol Hill under Article 1, Section 8, Brett.
Okay, Chad Program on the phone from Capitol Hill. Chad, thank you.
One more time. America is the greatest country on earth. That is my opinion.
Mike Tobin live on the ground in Tel Aviv with the very latest. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Griffin. Once again, the sirens wailed in central Israel this morning as another Iranian attack was inbound. The IDF now says some 27 Iranian missiles were part of that attack, and they've updated the number of drones, saying 30 drones were fired at Israel today. Almost all of the projectiles were intercepted mid-air, causing great booms in the sky as they were intercepted. Several did get through with massive warheads, causing a tremendous amount of destruction on the ground, particularly with the projectiles that hit here in central Israel in the Tel Aviv area. That being said, Magen David Adom Ambulance Agency reports some 80 injuries, but most of those injuries are light. Only one substantial injury, which is remarkable given the amount of power that was in the warheads of those particular missiles. Now, the Iranian foreign minister promises more attacks like this with a threatening post that reads in part, in accordance with the UN Charter and its provisions allowing a legitimate response in self-defense, Iran reserves all options to defend its sovereignty, interests, and people. Israeli fighter jets were active in the skies over central and western Iran today. 20 of them, to be specific. 2 F-5 fighter jets were hit on the ground, as well as 8 missile launchers that Israel says were neutralized as they were preparing to fire on Israel. The launchers that were used in the attack themselves were neutralized by the Israeli fighter jets that are still reportedly active in the skies over Iran. And a sad update from the war in the Gaza Strip. 3 of the hostages have been recovered, but not alive. The remains have been recovered. The names are as follows. Ofra Kedar, she was from one of the kibbutzes close to the Gaza Strip. Jonathan Mordecai Samarano, he had been attending the Nova Music Festival when he was kidnapped and killed. and Staff Sergeant Shai Levinson. Their remains were recovered this morning, not through negotiations, but rather through, I should say their remains were recovered yesterday, not through negotiations, but through a special operation. Guys, back to you in New York.
Mike, when we look at the activity of Israel over Iran, you know, American might sit here, a viewer might sit here and say, why don't we just bomb all of the launch sites that Iran has? That way they can't send any more missiles. Is it a situation where Israel is actively patrolling over Iran with fighter jets? Do they need to see a missile battery shoot before they can find its location? Do you have any insight on that?
Once they start moving them around, the Israelis do say they'll get them once they come out to launch. When they move the launchers into place, prime them, as they said today, that's when they can become visible to the fighter jets, and the fighter jets can operate at will over central and western Iran.
Mike, you mentioned the response from Iran so far, and obviously we've been covering that for the last week plus. Now the question becomes, does Iran shut down the Strait of Hormuz? What's your indication on that? Any sense as to whether they go that far?
Well, it seems that Iran would not have held back anything at this point. This is as severe as the conflict can get for them. If they want to take this to a naval war, they've got that option. The threat of mining the Strait of Hormuz has been there for decades now. We just haven't seen it materialize yet.
What do we know about the reaction of the neighbors to Iran, to Israel, just the neighborhood? What has been the reaction to this bombing?
Well, much less than we would have thought. One thing that prevented Israel from striking at Iran a long time ago was the threat that the Iranian proxies could cause so much damage, really, to the civilian population of Israel. Keep in mind that Israel hasn't really fought an enemy for a long time that fought them militarily, if you will. They had some air defenses in place, but mostly what you see is this threat that says, don't fire on us or we'll fire on your civilian population. We'll dispatch suicide bombers. Things of that nature. So it really does seem that if the proxies were going to act, they would have acted at this point. We've seen a few missiles out of the Houthi rebels, but that's about it.
Now, I was referring to Saudi Arabia as well, and Kuwait, and the UAE. But we're running out of time, Mike. We'll come back to that. Those are some of the questions we have, and we'll be following this story so closely. And we really appreciate you coming in.
The thing is, people think this is just coincidental. This is not coincidental, okay? You think Trump would have made the final decision without everybody in that region saying, you know what, we're tired. We're just tired of Iran doing all this. This man is a deal maker, okay? He's actually the person who wants to be friends with everybody. Remember, he was in Saudi Arabia. He was in these Arab countries and making deals. And he even got the Department of Defense a plane, a 747. So please, y'all need to understand that this man is America first, but also wants the world to be a better place and a peaceful place. So whatever it is that you have, whatever reservation that you have, just remember, just like C. Shelley said in the comment section, when all the chips are down, support your fellow American. Here we go.
Here with us now, our panel, Rabbi Chaim Mentz, Fox News contributor Kyron Skinner, and Aaron Cohen, Israeli Special Operations veteran. Aaron, let me come to you first. We heard President Trump there describe this as an attack against what is and has been the world's biggest state sponsor of terror. It seems impossible for, and I'm sure people will try, but it's impossible to argue any case against that. They have been, for decades now, the Iranians, the biggest state sponsor of terror in the world.
That's right, and they should have been designated a terrorist organization 39 years ago. Trump is spot on. He was spot on with his attack on Fordow. He had the intelligence. It was actionable. He didn't wait too long. He made the decision before the threat continued to emerge, took the shot, successful operation. But I can't help but think to believe, Jonathan, with my 25 years in this business, I don't think Fordow was the end, and that's the truth. I think Fordow is the beginning, and I'll tell you why. You can bury the centrifuge when this is over, after this operation was just conducted. but you're not going to bury this regime without taking them down. And that's really where I come out with this. And I think that the real work here is just going to begin. I think it's going to be Israel taking point here. Like your other guest was saying earlier, we're going to continue doing all this work. We're going to continue hunting the leaders. We're going to continue hunting the Quds Force. We're going to continue going after the planners. We're going to continue going after the engineers. They will all be hunted, but they'll have to be removed, because at the end of the day, even though you took out the weapon, it's the narcissistic, radical Islamist running that terror organization, which you set this up with, is ultimately the ones who would have pulled the trigger and used that nuclear weapon. And we have to have an honest conversation about what happens if they remain in.
Yeah.
So what's the next day look like? And I think those are the next conversations that we need to start having.
And Rabbi, talking of a regime change in Iran, we're hearing some statements from some of the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia among them, which are treading a careful line, not openly criticizing the U.S., but saying diplomacy is the only way forward. But it strikes me, and you were making this point earlier, what they say publicly might not be what they're thinking privately.
100%, because you got to realize Saudi Arabia has millions of Muslims living in their country, and they are very much in control of their country. But at the same time, they don't know who tomorrow is going to be in Iran. That's number one. Number two, you're right. What kind of regime change is going to be? There's a cancer. You can get out the missiles. You can get out the machine. But if the mindset is still that, because the Arabs love living, I shouldn't say Muslim, but these kind of people love living with time. If I didn't get you today, I'll get you 60 years from now. Such people cannot ever get into power. And that is the biggest threat for history. Thank God we took care of a Hitler. Thank God we took care of a Stalin. Thank God we took care of every single person that raises to power. But it seems like when it came to Iran, presidencies and many administrations were coddling them, saying, if you like us, you're not going to hit us. At the same time, we heard in the streets, death to America. So these types of leaders, it's not about regime change. It's more about thinking change. And that is the most important thing. These kind of people, your life will be better off if you stop thinking how I can murder everybody who doesn't think like me.
Right.
And that's where I think is where we have to start thinking about tomorrow.
Kyron, there's been a lot of debate in the run-up to the second Trump presidency, in the first few months of the second Trump presidential term, about whether this president is and would act as an isolationist. This seems to have put that debate to bed.
I think so, and it did something else. If you think about the 21st century, the Bush administration came in with some grand plans, and then they really got mugged by history with 9/11. And they had to pivot to the global war on terror. Much that was happening in the rest of the world, although they tried to address it, they had to just focus on defeating terrorists. And they fought wars in the Middle East, perhaps the wrong ones, but they did. Donald Trump is the first U.S. president in the 21st century to develop a grand strategy that's not just about the global war on terror and not just about the Middle East. What does that mean? There are many in the new MAGA movement, the America First movement, the bipartisan elites who want to define for him what that grand strategy should be. And this moment is one in which Donald Trump has taken the reins and has defined it for himself. That he's not an isolationist, he's not an interventionist, he's a peace strategist. And I think that's what we saw in the last 24 or 48 hours.
Yeah, it's interesting how many presidencies seem to be controlled or allow themselves to be controlled by foreign policy events. It seems to be a president, as you say, determined to take control of those events.
It is, and I think some are going to be quite upset with him that they did not prevail in their perspective. I know Mark Levin was really harshly criticized by the restrainers and the isolationists. Donald Trump is his own man. I don't understand why it's so difficult for many of his advisors and many of those in the larger and emerging conservative movement think he needs guidance from them. He's reading the globe fairly well, I would say.
Is this the president the world needed at the time he needed it, Aaron?
Well, if you were to add up the amount of Americans killed, the amount of Israelis getting attacked daily, October 7th, the 1,200 kidnapped, the 1,200 murdered, the up to 250, 60 kidnapped and taken into the tunnels, the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah for 20 years, while you were living in Israel and those missiles were coming over in the north, while Israel was in the southern border there at or southern Lebanon. Listen, this is the president who has essentially helped their forward operating ally, Israel, take down Hezbollah, and now the nuclear bully of the last 40 years. This is the president the world needed. There's no lollygagging with this guy. And like you said, he's his own man.
There's no lollygagging.
He doesn't need advisors. He understands the global threat here, takes the shot when he needs to. He's just got certainty and moral clarity. And I think it's interesting to see him get everybody else on the run and start getting everybody in line, but for the good of the world. And you know what? There's going to be this opposition and whatnot, but we don't have the luxury to deal with this nonsense with the other side right now. Like I'm into it, and I like where it's going, and I'm interested to see where it's going to continue to go.
Interesting description.
Like it or not, this guy was voted in by 77.3 million voters, Americans. So I see on Twitter, and of course everywhere else, Candace Owens doesn't support this. She hasn't been supporting Donald Trump for a while now. But the fact is, it is what it is. I'm not going to be supporting a country who shouts and screams death to America. It is impossible. I'm not going to do that. I get it. You may not agree with what happened last night. However, if you are American and you're saying Iranians or whatever, look, they scream, at least their leaders scream death to America. So what are you supposed to do? As an American, you're supposed to support those people, over your president, over your commander-in-chief? I don't think so. I support Trump. In fact, if he does
we want to
do
bring in
more,
now
I'll
Fox News
support it.
contributor and former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Mr. Secretary, thank you for getting up early. If you will, just your reaction to what has transpired and to put into context for us, how significant of an operation, of a moment is this?
Well, good morning. It's a very significant operation. Our military did indeed, as President Trump said, carry out an operation that there's no other country in the world could do. That's been years and years in the making. But the folks who were flying last night were brave and capable and clearly delivered on their mission. And every American should be incredibly proud of that and thankful for them. As for what resulted, the world is safer today. And you were asking earlier, what do the Gulf Arab states think this morning? I am confident that they too are safer. So this was important not only for Israel and for the Gulf Arab states, but to keep the United States of America safe as well. President Trump, I served with him for 4 years. For a decade now, he's been very clear. They're not going to get a nuclear weapon in Iran. And this is just a further manifestation of his commitment to that over a long period of time. And last night, he executed a mission that was righteous and decent and important and will keep us all safer.
Mr. Secretary, you say the world is safer today, and I understand the logic there, but I think it's reasonable to say that the service members stationed in the Middle East probably aren't safer today. Do you have any prediction on what Iran's retaliation might look like if they would target capabilities as opposed to troops or anything like that?
No, that's a good point. Look, it's always hard to put your own soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines' lives at risk. I remember when we took the Soleimani strike, we were very worried and had done a ton of work to keep folks at Al-Assad Air Base and our other facilities in the Middle East safe. I'm confident that the administration has taken those protections as well. Make no mistake about it, the Iranians could come after that, but President Trump has set the course, right? He has said, you're not going to have a nuclear weapon, and if you come after an American, we're going to wreak absolute hell on you. I think the Iranian regime is thinking through that in the same way they did after we took out General Soleimani. While we had some soldiers injured, their response was relatively weak, and they are even in a far weaker place. Their capabilities today are even far weaker than they were when we took that strike back in the first Trump administration. So I suspect they're trying to figure out what to do. I'll be very surprised if they challenge President Trump and the United States Department of Defense.
Well, I hope that you're absolutely right, Mike, because we've been told that the regime is insane and genocidal. So let's hope that they're being rational right now. One of the things that I'm concerned about is that we've had 4 years of an open border. And so one of the, we've been talking about what kind of retaliatory attacks they can make in that region. But we've had an open border and a record number of unknown and known terrorists coming across our border over the last 4 years. So what kind of implications does that have for the United States right now in terms of potential sleeper cells and attacks actually here on the homeland?
I've been talking about this risk for 4 years. It's probably even slightly heightened now. There's no doubt the Iranian regime has tried to put active agents on the ground in Europe and Brussels and Paris and London, and indeed here in the United States. And you're absolutely right. We've had a wide open border. We know that at least a couple of hundred folks who were already on the American terror designated watch list who came across the border during the Biden administration. So that risk is not zero. It could be that that'll be a method by which the Iranians will choose to try and take vengeance and respond and to deter the United States. I'm counting on our FBI and local law enforcement to help keep all of us safe, including those who have been threatened directly by the regime itself. But more importantly than that, I think the Iranians' calculus has to be very careful here. They have to understand that while we spared the political leadership and energy infrastructure targets last night, there's no guarantee that that will continue if they come after an American, whether that's one of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines abroad, or someone here in the United States.
And you yourself were famously threatened by the regime as well. I want to get your thoughts on this because satellite images show lines of trucks leaving the Fordo facility on Thursday, about 48 hours prior to the strike. Are you worried that Iran was able to move out material from Fordo? Again, it's unclear exactly what was in those trucks, but, your instinct says they moved some nuclear material, whatever they could potentially move in those trucks. Are you worried about that?
I think this is going to be something that the U.S. intelligence community and the Israeli intelligence community have to work their way through to figure out what they did to disperse not only those cylinders that held the highly enriched uranium, but their intellectual capital as well, that human capital that drives their program forward, and the components of their ballistic missile system. They'll try to hide them and scatter them. I think that's something that we'll have to stay after. I suspect that in spite of the real success last night, there'll still be work to do to fully eradicate every remnant of their nuclear program. But I think we shouldn't forget there's a massive setback from what President Trump did last night. The change in the nature of the Iranian capability to launch or build a nuclear weapon is now enormously diminished as a result of what the Israelis have done over the last 9 days and what the United States of America did that it only could do last night.
Hey, Mr. Secretary, I want to ask you about this operation, and it's what our colleague here, Jen Griffin, says maybe one of the most remarkable operational security feats pulled off. We, of course, learned from the tracking of B-2s headed to Guam west, but it appears the real package delivered flew east, made this 30-hour round trip, and no one knew about it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, bravo. Well done. Hard to do in Washington, D.C. to keep narratives from leaking, storylines from leaking. The administration did truly, truly good work. I think there was strategic campaign as well of misinformation, right, to move those bombers to Guam. I think, by the way, I think it sent a message to the Chinese Communist Party, too. You might want to stay out of this. But I also think it was an effort when President Trump said, hey, you've got up to 2 weeks. I think he heard from the Iranians they weren't remotely interested in negotiating seriously. And he said, no, we're going to move quickly. We're going to do the necessary. We're going to make sure they don't have this capability. And so I think this was a incredibly strategic operation. And I think both the Russians and the Chinese now understand that President Trump is not President Biden, And not only did we make the world safer in the specific with respect to this Iranian threat, but President Trump has grabbed the peace through strength mantra, the peace through strength model that President Reagan so expertly wielded, and now has kept us all safer from multiple threats, not just the Iranian regime.
Mike, really quick, a question, because you brought up China, and that's something that we're all very concerned about. When Ukraine and the Russians went into war, we saw that China and Russia got closer. So that was sort of one of the repercussions of that war that I felt like wasn't really thought enough about. We had a guest on earlier who said, yes, that this strike and the fact that China didn't come in to help that we know of Iran in this, that this shows that, this proves that China is weaker today because of that. But the other possibility is that China maybe likes this, and seeing us distracted, whether it's in Ukraine or bogged down in another Middle East adventure. Could that be something that concerns you? And what does that mean for the world, and especially for the East, where China is focused a lot more on?
So a couple thoughts here. First, I don't think President Trump's going to permit the United States to get bogged down here. We use this language, I think, with
I hope not. I hope you're right.
Yes.
Yeah.
With relative looseness, right? He has made very clear these is a set of limited targets with an objective of eliminating their nuclear program. And I get it. In war, things can happen that you don't expect.
Yeah.
But the Chinese Communist Party would be wholly mistaken if they think this is going to distract us from deterring their aggression, whether that's against the United States or against Taiwan. President Trump will manage through each of these in a way that protects and keeps Americans safe. I'm very confident of that. And we should think, too, the Chinese are the primary purchaser of Iranian crude oil. When we talk about whether they might decide to close the Strait of Hormuz, the most directly and most immediately impacted will be the Chinese economy, not Western economies. And so I think the Chinese picked a loser.
The fact is, nobody dictates what Trump is going to do. Okay, at least you have a president who thinks for himself. I know people are going to say, well, Israel, he's pandering to Israel. No, he's not. Israel is our ally, but he's not pandering to Israel or Bibi. He's definitely doing what is good for America, because Iran, like I said before, like I mentioned before, these guys, the leaders, not the Iranian people, get me right, not the Iranian people. I'm talking about the Iranian supreme leader, talking about screaming death to America. That is not going to work. Now, imagine if they have, or they become a nuclear state. Do you know how bad that would be for the United States? Instead of just shouting death to America, they're just going to do the actual thing. So I am glad Trump made that decision. He gave them 60 days, ladies and gentlemen. He gave them 60 days. Why couldn't Iran leaders just come to the table, sign the deal, and get on with life and bring peace to that region and make sure prosperity comes to the people? Instead of just bullying the people to come and say on national TV, saying we support the supreme leader. Of course, they're going to come on national TV and say we support the supreme leader. What are they going to say? This is the supreme leader that you cannot be gay in Iran. You cannot walk on the street without your head or your hair covered as a woman. Okay, there's so many things you cannot do in Iran. I get it, cultures are different, but you can't say, I do not support the supreme leader. What do you think is going to happen to you when you come out and say, look, I don't support the supreme leader? Of course, CNN goes on the street and they're interviewing Iranians saying, we support the supreme leader. Of course, they support the supreme leader. You know what the supreme leader is going to do to them if they don't support the supreme leader? Huh? What do you think this is? Okay, this ain't child's play. Okay, but with that being said, God is the greatest. America is the greatest country in the world. All right? It is what it is. I support the United States. Whatever you decide for yourself. But I support the United States, and I support the Commander-in-Chief. And I'm praying for the 45th, now the 47th President of the United States, President Donald J. Trump. Of course, like I mentioned, Candace Owens is not in support of this, and also calls his actions deranged. And she's saying, in essence, she supports Iran, because if you're not supporting your president and your country, then I guess you support Iran.
here. I think Xi Jinping woke up today recognizing that he had picked the loser, and I am not surprised that neither he nor Vladimir Putin and Russia have actually come to the assistance of an.
And somebody said in the chat, how much are you getting paid to ignore facts? That's the thing. I was actually demonetized on YouTube for doing this. Y'all think man, look, this folks. How much are you getting paid? I was demonetized last year. I just got monetized again. So relax, okay? I love the United States. This is why I do this. And I'm thankful to YouTube for this platform to be able to share what's going on in the United States first and across the world. So relax with all that. How much are you getting paid to do this? What else? What else we got? What else you got? I don't get it why Americans would support protesters who are looting, burning down cars, waving foreign flags, screaming, let's change the system. F ICE, F Trump, burning the American flag. Americans are saying yes, yes. Now, Trump has taken decisive action to do what needed to be done in Iran. Americans are still saying, why would he go after Iran? So are you actually American? It's like, I wasn't even born in the United States. You were born in the United States and you don't support your flag. You don't support the United States. You don't support your leader. All right, it's over.
Nation that they promised they had a deep forever partnership with, and they have just been no-shows as Iran has been decimated.
Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, thank you.
Instead of looking for perfection, seek for consistency. Never give up on yourself. Never give up on your dreams. Never give up on God. Believe in yourself. Believe in your dreams. And believe in Almighty God. God is the greatest. Happy Sunday. Thank you so much to the esteemed members of the channel. Dr. Luke, shout out to the GOAT. He's not here, but everybody needs to know the GOAT on this channel. Dr. Luke, God bless you wherever you are. Hopefully you're having a good time with your 7-year-old daughter. God bless you one more time, Dr. Luke, the GOAT. Shout out to Ellie. Shout out to Ringmaster. Shout out to Sandra. And of course, the hard-working, beautiful C. Shelley. All right, I said it. I said it. Ladies and gentlemen, I said it. Okay. Shout out to C. Shelley. God bless you. And thank you to your son being in the Air Force. Thank you for his service. And shout out to Derek. Shout out to Derek, I see you in the chat. God bless you, Derek. Shout out to Terry Vinings. Terry Vinings, ladies and gentlemen. Terry Vinings. The Bama girl, like C. Shelley would call her. The Bama girl, like C. Shelley would call her. Terry Vinings, yo. God bless you, Terry. What else we got? Who else we got? Who else? What other patriot do we have in the chat? Because everybody seems to not be in love with America these days. Because I'm like, what in the world going on? What else? Shout out to Derek one more time, man. All right. God is the greatest. Shout out to the military personnel. Shout out to the veterans. My prayer one day in the United States is we would have no homeless veterans. We would have no hungry veterans. One day, I hope we would have no homeless veterans and no hungry veterans. God is the greatest, and God would protect our veterans, and hopefully our leaders will do what's needed to be done. God is the greatest one more time. And shout out to everybody in the chat. Shout out to every American to support America, to put America first, regardless. Okay. Thank you for supporting the United States. God bless y'all. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And life is hard. I get it. Sometimes, things happen. You didn't plan for it. You lose a loved one, or, you lose your job, or some emergency comes up and you have to spend your savings. I get it. Sometimes things happen, but never forget that God is your strength. He's not going to leave you. God is your strength. Okay. God is always with you. Stay strong. Stay strong, okay? God is with you. And fathers, take care of your kids. Fathers, I say that one more time. Fathers, please spend time with your kids. Spend time with your kids. Give them some hugs, kisses. Let them know they matter, that you love them. Okay, remember, kids do not ask to come here. We decided to bring them to this world. I'll say that again. Kids, children, do not just come here. magically. Okay, we decide to have kids. So when they come here, please take care of your children. Spend time with them, train them, love them, hug on them, because when you grow older, those things pay off. You smile and you're happy because your kids are in love with you, okay? Because your job is not going to be in love with you. I'll tell you that much. Your job is not going to be in love with you. But you got to do what you got to do to provide for your family. I get it. What else? Mothers, thank you for the mothers. Mothers have been doing great jobs since the beginning of time. Mothers, look, they are the MVP. They've been doing this for a long, long time. So, look, I got nothing to say, but just say thank you to the mothers. Now, America is the greatest country on earth. I'll say that one more time. America is the greatest country in the world, on planet Earth. Okay? Thank you so much. And shout out to Ice, baby. Shout out to Ice doing their job as well. God bless ICE. And hopefully these blue states would let ICE, federal agents, do their jobs. And shout out to law enforcement officers as well. God bless. God bless the law enforcement officers and everybody. God bless you and your family. Don't forget, God is the greatest and America is the greatest country on earth. It is your boy Genesis. Thank you. I gotta go. Love y'all.